Hey, I'm Alicia Newcomb, and this is Assembly Guide, your guide to assembling and organizing as we work to make change in our theatrical industry. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So happy you're here, back at Assembly Guide. We are going to talk about something really specific today in terms of being something I think needs to change to make theater safer and more sustainable for the people who are doing it. And that is scheduling. What we do as performers at any level, and everyone involved with the theater industry, but I'm only going to speak on behalf of myself, and I'm a performer. What we do is extremely difficult. We make it look easy for the audience. That's all a part of the show. But what we do is really hard. And for people to be able to understand just why our scheduling is an issue, I need people to understand how difficult what we do really is. Putting on a show is vocally and physically demanding. Our show, as a performer, I'm currently a performer with Wicked Broadway. Our show, for example, is 2 hours and 45 minutes long. We are on stage as the ensemble for most of Act 1 and a large chunk of Act 2. Our principals, especially our witches, are on stage almost the entire show. That is a lot of singing and dancing. 2 hours and 45 minutes is a long time, especially if you think about doing that 8 times a week. Most shows function on what we normally think of as an 8-show-a-week schedule. Those 8 shows are performed over 6 of the 7 days of the week, and then we have 1 day that is off so that we can rest and recover. But I want you to think about it for a minute. A lot of jobs, think 9-to-5 jobs, work Monday through Friday, and then you have the weekend off. That's not universal, obviously. There are many different types of jobs and careers and industries that have very different schedules as well. But a lot of people have 2 days off a week. As a performer, when you're working on a show, you typically have 1 day off a week. And not all shows are what we call long-running shows. Some might only run for a few months and then close. Some run even shorter length and close, and that has its own huge difficulties and challenges. I want to speak to my experience. And my experience recently is that of being a performer on a long-running show on a Broadway production contract. So our schedule, our quote, normal schedule, although I'm going to get into detail about how that's not even normal, is 8 shows a week with Mondays off, working Tuesday through Sunday. Because what we do as performers, it often involves being at work in the hours that most of the world has off, which is why we perform shows at night, we perform shows on weekends, and our weekends are often 2-show days. So in our regular work week, where we do 8 shows a week over 6 working days, 4 of those days we do 1 show. 2 of those days we do 2 shows. So on a 2-show day, we'll typically have a 2 p.m. show and an 8 p.m. show, or even better, a 2 p.m. show and a 7 p.m. show, which is a lot nicer because then you don't, as performers, because then you don't have a very long break between the shows and you're able to just keep the day rolling. That's difficult for other unions who have earlier show calls than actors have for their shows to be ready for the show. So often for other unions, a shorter break is actually sometimes more difficult because they don't get much break time in between shows. As performers, I personally like a 2 p.m. and a 7 p.m. show schedule better than I like a 2 p.m. and an 8 p.m. But our schedules change throughout the year. So the 2-show days can be wherever. They can be 1 show for most of the week, and then you do 2 shows Saturday and 2 shows Sunday, which is what we call a 5-show weekend, because you do 1 show Friday, 2 shows Saturday, 2 shows Sunday. Or for most of our summertime, we frequently have 2 shows on Wednesday and 2 shows on Saturday. So every other day except for the Monday day off is typically 1 show. That schedule is much nicer on our voices and bodies because it matters how you stack your work week. I'm doing extremely demanding vocally and physically work. So when you cram 5 shows into a weekend, that has a different effect on our voices, on our bodies, than it does when we do 2 shows on Wednesday and 2 shows on Saturday, giving us more recovery time between our heaviest days so that our bodies, our muscles, our voices, which is also muscular, have time to recover so that we're not hurting ourselves by putting half of our work week into 2 days back to back. That's extremely difficult. At the time I recorded this episode, the Tony Awards had just happened. And when I was watching, I noticed that in her acceptance speech, Nicole Scherzinger said, "Y'all know this Broadway schedule is hardcore." She also said, "It's no joke, this schedule." Renee Rapp, in speaking about her time with Mean Girls on Broadway, said, 8 shows a week is the hardest thing ever. I was dying. It's insane, but it was like boot camp. And they're not the only celebrities to have said such things about the Broadway schedule. Recently, it's become pretty common for celebrities to perform as a part of Broadway shows. A lot of shows do star casting for their principal actors. And what I've seen from a lot of these people is speaking publicly on how difficult what we do as Broadway performers is, about how tough and how demanding our schedules are. Even when they're only, and I say only very generously because 8 shows a week is extremely difficult. But even when they're 8 shows a week, celebrities and star actors have spoken as to how difficult that schedule is. It is extremely hard to give high quality live entertainment performances 8 times a week. It's hard. It's exhausting. And we only have 1 day off a week to rest and recover from all of that. When you only have 1 day off a week and you're doing shows at mostly nighttime the rest of your week, when I have a show at night, depending on how my body's feeling, sometimes I have to just rest during the day to ensure I'm able to give the quality of show that I need to give at night, because what we do is hard. So I'm not able to get errands or things done. I'm not able to go get groceries or go do my laundry or do everything that I need to do that I don't have much time for in my week. Sometimes I can't do that on a 1-show day because I just need to rest my body because we only have 1 day off for recovery. So when we get 1 day off a week, oftentimes that's not even a full rest day because we as actors are needing to do, and other people involved in theatrical industries, we're needing to do everything we're not able to do during the week. We're needing to run errands. We're needing to go get groceries, do laundry. And also, I want to remind everyone, getting groceries and doing laundry in New York is more physically demanding than it can be in other places. I have a laundromat that's 4 blocks away and I live on a 5-floor walk up. So it's not as simple as putting laundry in my washer and dryer. It's going down the 5 flights of stairs, 4 blocks over to the laundromat, coming back up the stairs, going back to switch the laundry, coming back, going back to get the laundry, coming back, climbing 5 flights of stairs. Same thing for groceries. The grocery store that I shop at is just under 10 blocks and 2 avenues away. And so you're walking all the way there and all the way back, and you're carrying heavy bags of groceries because you're buying for usually at least the entire week, sometimes longer. Everyone's different. But that said, all of that is more physically demanding than it is sometimes in other areas, other places where you might have a car, where you might have a washer and a dryer in your building or in your apartment. So one day off a week is tough. And I find for myself, I'm either getting the things done that I need to get done to be prepared for the next week, or I'm resting. And then my whole week I feel behind because I wasn't able to get the things done that I need to do. And I'm trying to squeeze that in throughout the rest of my week while I also prepare myself to do my show 8 times a week and recover from that safely. It's hard. So I want to talk about the hours that we put into what we do. I think from the outside looking in, it's easy to say, well, you don't work as many hours as people doing a 9 to 5 or working in other careers. And if you just look at the fact that we're doing a 2-hour, 45-minute show, in my case, some shows are shorter, some shows are longer. If we're doing a show that's around that length 8 times a week, sure, it doesn't feel like a lot of time. So I'm going to break this down to make this more understandable as to why that is not the only amount of time that is required for my job in my work week. The show itself, as I've said, is 2 hours and 45 minutes. As an actor, I am called to the theater 30 minutes in advance of showtime to get ready for the show. Depending on what your track or your job is within a show, that time looks different to everyone. For me personally, I get my wig on at 15 minutes to curtain. So I have 15 minutes that I have to be totally ready to put my wig on and be ready to go for the show. So everything that I have to do before the show, I essentially have to do before then. Otherwise, I'm not going to be ready on time. So all that aside, if you only count showtime, 2 hours and 45 minutes, 8 times a week, and then an extra half-hour call that we're called for the show explicitly, that adds up to 26 hours a week for solely show calls and showtime. So looking at that, you can say, oh, well, that's not really a lot of work from the outside looking in. Although what we do, again, is extremely physically and vocally demanding. Very, very difficult work. So 26 hours for just showtime and show calls. Well, like I said, my wig call is at 15 minutes to curtain. So I like to be at the theater earlier than that to make sure I can get my pin curls done and get a warm-up in so that I am safely ready for my show. That's all a part of preparing for my job. So for a 7 o'clock show, I like to arrive to the theater at 5:45. Gives me 15 minutes to pin curl, and it gives me a little over half an hour to warm up. Usually my pin curl time runs a little longer because I'm not rushing. I'm doing it casually, chatting with friends in the dressing room, etc. But that gives me time to feel ready for the show. So if I add up that time of being at the theater 45 minutes prior to half hour for 8 shows a week, that's an extra 6 hours of time. So now we're at 32 hours of work. Well, guess what? I have to have makeup on for my show. And I also have to do a vocal warm-up for my show because the voice is muscles and those muscles need to be warm so that I can sing safely and avoid vocal injury. I do my makeup and my vocal warm-up at home to respect people's space in the dressing room. So on a 2-show day, I'm only going to count my makeup and vocal time once because I do that before the matinee, and then I'm ready for basically the rest of the day. So if you count 6 times 20 minutes of makeup and vocal warm-up, which is what I do at home to prepare, that's another 2 hours. So now we're at 34 hours of work. Well, guess what? In order to maintain our bodies to safely do our show, that involves physical therapy. At our theater, physical therapy is provided in 20-minute sessions, and you can sign up for 1 session a week. So if I count 1 20-minute session of PT at work, and then as a professional athlete, which performers and dancers especially are professional athletes, I am frequently rehabilitating an injury of some sort or some sort of muscle overwork or fatigue or strain. So I'm frequently in PT outside of work for at least one injury or one body part for pretty much most of the year, especially as a performer on a raked stage, which is significantly harder on the body and puts immensely more strain on our bodies. So for that PT, that's 2 sessions a week, and they're usually 30 minutes. So that is in total 1 hour and 20 minutes of PT care a week to maintain my body safely. Plus, in order to be able to do my show safely, to be strong enough to maintain what I have to do physically 8 times a week without intense injury to my body, I exercise and do weight training. I try to go 3 to 4 times a week, but I'm being gentle here with my hours. So let's say 3 times a week. So that's 3 hours a week that I am working out to be able to safely do my show. So between PT and exercise, that's 4 hours and 20 minutes a week going towards my body to be able to safely do my show. So now, with show calls and showtime, pin curl time and vocal warm-up time, as well as physical warm-up for the show and doing my makeup and PT and working out, that adds up to 38 hours and 20 minutes a week that I put towards my show. Well, being a physical athlete includes doing a cool down after the end of my exercise. So after every show, I cool down my body to make sure that I help take care of my muscles. I'm taking care of things so that I'm not getting injured. I'm turning those muscles off. I'm telling my body it's time to calm down. I do essentially 30 minutes 6 times a week at the evening, after the evening performance each working day. So that adds up to 3 hours of cool down. And again, to maintain my body, to make sure that I'm in a state of maintenance and not responding to injuries that happen from not taking care of my body, I usually do acupuncture 1 time a week because I have found that that really helps my body and my ability to do my job safely. So that's 1 hour a week. So now, in total, we're at 42 hours and 20 minutes a week that I put into doing my job. Frequently, I am nursing 2 injuries at a time just because of the nature of my show on a raked stage, which again puts a huge toll on your muscles, your joints, your bones, on everything, because everything you're doing is at an angle. So if you don't know what a raked stage is, I'm going to break it down for a minute. Stages historically used to be raked, which means they were on a slant. So at the front of the stage where you're closest to the audience, that part of the stage was lower than the back of the stage, which was further away from the audience, which used to be higher. So the stage was on an incline, on an angle, which is why we have stage directions called downstage and upstage. That's how those terms came to be. Well, think about standing on an angle for an hour. Usually I feel it in my lower back first. That starts to hurt just standing there. Now imagine running up and down that slanted surface for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Now imagine doing it in 3-inch heels and also leaping at people, jumping, being lifted in the air and landing from very large leaps and lifts. Or if you are the male presenting ensemble in our show, you're lifting people, or imagine in your brain lifting weights over your head, running up and down that hill for 2 hours and 45 minutes. It is difficult. It is really hard. And because of that, I'm frequently nursing 2 injuries or so at a time. So that's another hour a week, putting us at 43 hours and 20 minutes a week I put into my job. And I've also learned about myself that pneumatic compression boots really help my body and my muscle recovery when I'm doing such a physically demanding job 8 times a week. So I have a set of compression boots that my husband got me for my birthday. And I am very fortunate to have those as a recovery tool that those are expensive and not everyone is able to invest in those. So imagine not being able to have the equipment you need to take care of your body. But I wear my compression boots at home for an hour every night. So that's an extra 7 hours on top of the time that I already spend towards my show and my job and being able to do it safely. So in total, we're at 50 hours and 20 minutes that we put towards our jobs, in my personal experience. Well, guess what? Aside from doing your show 8 times a week, you can also have rehearsal up to 10 hours a week before being paid overtime. If you understudy someone, you can be rehearsed even more before being paid overtime. But as an ensemble member who does not understudy anyone in our show, I can be rehearsed up to 10 hours a week before overtime kicks in. And even then, I can be rehearsed longer with overtime pay. So, if I have rehearsal 10 hours a week, in addition to all the hours that I already put into my show and my job and being able to do it safely and sustainably, that puts me at 60 hours and 20 minutes of work a week. Now, if you think 9 to 5, working 5 days a week, that's 40 hours of work a week. Really 35 if you count a 1 hour lunch every day. And in that work structure, you get 2 days off a week. I am working 60 hours and 20 minutes a week at minimum. And when I say at minimum, I mean the minimum amount included within our contractual salary before any sort of overtime is required to be paid to us. With 1 day off. 1 day off. If I put my 60 hours and 20 minutes of work a week into a 5-day work week schedule to compare, I am working just over 12 hours a day compared to a 9 to 5, which is 8 hours, one of which would be lunch. So in my case, I would be working 13 hours a day, just over, 1 hour of which would be lunch. So, comparing our jobs to a 9 to 5 and saying you don't work nearly as many hours is wholly inaccurate. And I talk about this because I need people who work in our industry, people who produce within our industry, people who hire us on our contracts in our industry, people who support our industry as audience members to understand just how time-consuming, physically and vocally demanding, and difficult our schedules are. I am not working 26 hours a week. I am working over 60 hours a week. And it is entirely unfair to say that we work less than most other people. Let's also talk about how physically demanding our jobs are. I'm a dancer. My job is also extremely vocally demanding, singing in our show. I'm going to speak more to the physical aspect because that's what I know better. When you work out, it's not typically advised that you work out year-round. Remember, I'm on a long-running show, so this schedule is year-round. We get currently 2 weeks of vacation time off per calendar year and 3 unpaid personal days. We can also have, I believe, 3 days of bereavement time. And the restrictions around that are currently solely that it is for direct family members, which is a problem because we need to expand the way that we think about family. We don't get to decide who people's families are or who matters to different people. So that's already a problem. But it is not typically advised to work out 6 days a week year-round with 1 day of recovery per week for the entire calendar year. From what I've seen, research typically suggests having more than 1 recovery day per week, especially for high intensity athletes, which we are. Also, research suggests that if you're working out 6 days a week, you should change the muscles that you're working on. It wouldn't make sense to do leg day 6 days a week and then have 1 day off and do that year round. You would get injured. Your leg muscles would fatigue and be overworked, and you would then have injuries that you're dealing with. Because of the nature of our jobs, we are working the same exact muscles for 2 hours and 45 minutes. You're doing the same thing 6 days a week, physically. That repetitive motion stacks. It takes a toll on your body, takes a toll on your muscles, and that's why you have repetitive motion injuries from doing the same thing over and over and over and loading the same muscle over and over and over, and then only having one recovery day. When you work out, it typically creates small tears in the muscles, which then, that's why recovery is important, so those muscle fibers can repair themselves, so we build strength. Well, when we don't have the recovery time that we need and we're constantly working the same muscles in the same exact way over and over and over year round, it results in injury, period. It's inevitable, which is why so many hours are required of us to maintain our bodies and voices physically so that we can safely do our jobs. I also want to talk about the scheduling allowances that exist in our contract by nature of there being very few restrictions as to what cannot be done. So you know how I said our regular work week means Monday is a day off, and then we work Tuesday through Sunday, and we do 8 shows in that time frame, and 2 of those days have 2 shows each, and those days can be moved. Well, that's what is typically, quote, normal. However, we don't really have a normal because you know what's allowed under our contracts? Our Monday day off can be moved to any day of the week. As long as we get a day off within that 7-day stretch, it can be anywhere within the week. So let's put 2 weeks, Monday through Sunday, back to back. Let's say we have Monday off the first week and we do shows Tuesday through Sunday. Our employers can take the next Monday day off and decide, you know what, we want to put more shows before a day off, so we're going to move that day off even to the Sunday of the second week. So we can be working Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and continue working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then have a day off on Sunday. And if they haven't thrown any extra shows in there, we do not get any extra compensation. Now, like I said, stacking the demands of your work week different ways affects your body differently because we are doing high intensity physical activity and vocal activity in our singing, and not giving the body time to recover from that creates strain, creates overuse, which all lead to injury. So I can have an extremely more difficult and physically demanding and likely leading to injury work week without having any sort of protection or compensation as a result. That is allowed in our schedules. Also, if you stack 2 show days back to back to back, like we talked about, that creates more strain on the body. We do have a protection where if we have 2 show days, 3 days in a row, you then have to have a second day off, I believe. But that day off doesn't necessarily have to immediately follow the first day off. And it's 6 shows in 3 days. So 3 2-show days in a row is only allowed, I believe, up to 12 times per year currently. But think about that for a second. 12 times a year. You can overload your schedule to that extent where you're doing 6 shows in 3 days, which again creates strain on the body, which leads to injury, which then, if you go back into a normal work week, you're still not getting ample time to recover from. So all of this stacks. we're not getting enough time to rest and recover our bodies and voices, especially when scheduling is so flexible and doesn't create ample rest and recovery time regularly for us. Because of these schedule allowances, I've worked several schedules where I think we did a 12-show stretch and then had one day off, and then did a 14-show stretch and then had one day off, and then continued back to our regular scheduling, which is 8 shows a week with only one day off. We do this frequently. It usually happens around holidays, because holidays are when shows can make more money, which I understand that shows can make more money. I do not believe that is a reason that you can or should abuse your performers' voices and bodies with overwork and overscheduling, especially when we don't have any sort of protections to help us in that time. Protections like extra physical therapy care in the building, protections like overtime pay for doing extra shows before a day off, because then you can maybe use that to get yourself the care that you need outside of work, like a massage or acupuncture or whatever you need to take care of your body, or even just be compensated for being overworked, essentially. It is hard, and it's an issue that needs to change, because it leads to injury, as I've said so many times. It leads to coverage in buildings being stretched too thin. And by that, I mean there not being enough swings, or swings having to work split tracks, which means they're doing essentially more than one person's job for the entire show within one show. So swings can be doing so many people's jobs at the same time. For right now, I'm going to say this, I'm like doing like jazz hands, trying to do like sirens with my hands, for no extra pay, until they do 5 people's jobs at the same time, which is wild, because that never happens. If a swing is doing 5 people's job at the same time, that show is usually, I say usually because it has happened where people have done even more people's jobs at the same time. And that should never, ever, ever happen. But the show is usually canceled, because that is very difficult to run a show when someone is doing 5 people's jobs at the same time. But swings can do 2 people's jobs, 3 people's jobs, 4 people's jobs at the same time with no extra pay. I want us to think for a moment about how that makes any sense, because it does not. But scheduling contributes to that, because people get hurt, people then have to call out and not be at work. And then the coverage that exists within a show is already on, covering multiple people's jobs. And then if people continue to get hurt, then all of a sudden we don't have enough people to do the show safely. And then people are called in last minute to replace people, and maybe they haven't been at that theater in months. And maybe there was a rehearsal where things were changed, but things haven't been communicated to the people who weren't in the building when that happened. And then all of a sudden we're in dangerous situations on stage. All of this overlaps. I know I talk about a lot of different components of what we do in overlapping manners in all of these episodes, but it is because they all contribute to and feed off of each other, which is why they all need to be addressed and resolved. And excuse me, I'm not going to apologize because I'm passionate, because these create safety issues in theaters. But thank you for understanding my passion and my frustration with the situations that are currently allowed in regards to coverage and the topic of this podcast, scheduling in theaters. So, on the brighter side, what can we do? How do we fix this issue? I think first we start by continuing to have conversations. When I first started working for a show that adjusted scheduling in such a manner, and it's easier, I think, to do that when a show is sitting in the same place versus on tour. On tour, I had schedules for different shows that were different, but they didn't differ to this extreme. And to help explain what I mean, for example, if we consider a work week Monday to Sunday, this is a different conversation, but I consider a work week the time between days off because, like I've said, that has a different effect on your body. It doesn't feel like the week is over until all of my shows are over and I'm at the next day off. So when the days off can move, things become complicated. And when I looked at it that way, I was curious how many different types of work weeks I worked, for example, in 2024 at my show. And I went back. This is public information and I am stating facts, so I feel comfortable speaking this. I worked 15 different types of work week structures in 2024. 15. So if you work a job that has somewhat typical hours, imagine working 15 different types of work weeks in your calendar year. Having work weeks where there's not any normalcy or regularity between the type of work week that you work from week to week is so difficult because your body can't adjust. It feels like flying to another time zone and having to adjust, and then flying to another time zone and having to adjust, and then flying to another one and doing that 15 times and expecting that to feel normal on your body. It doesn't. There's no way to adjust to figure out what you need to be able to do your show safely and sustainably when you can't get any sort of understanding of what your schedule is because it changes so much. That also creates issues in us being able to care for ourselves in the way that we need to do our shows safely and sustainably. But I got intense there again, but I'm going back to what can we do about it, having conversation. When I first experienced that, I thought that only existed in the building that I was in. When I started talking about it and I started sharing factual information like my schedule, which is just what the schedule is, more regularly, I started sharing it on social media and people reached out to me and told me how this was happening at their theaters as well. And when I took a larger look, it shocked me, and also it didn't shock me at the same time to realize that this is happening all over. I think all across our industry, but specifically all across Broadway. There is very little regularity in scheduling. And it's a problem. And the more that we talk about it, the more we can strengthen that we are not alone, that this is a large community issue that needs to be resolved, and we can get a better understanding of how it affects people differently. I've shared with you how it affects me, but it might affect someone completely differently. And the more I can understand that by talking to people about it, the more holistic picture I have of why it's such an issue and how we can possibly resolve it. Because I have my own thoughts, but the more I expand my understanding of how that affects everyone, the better solutions I'm going to be able to create, and the more effectively I'm going to be able to gather people and mobilize people in support of pushing for this as I continue to move forward. So let's talk about it. I don't believe it's ever a negative thing to share or speak on your show schedule. That is public information available on each show's website when you go to purchase tickets. I can see any show's schedule. So that's factual information. If companies or shows experience negative feelings around their schedule being public knowledge, I would say that right there goes to show that those shows also realize it is an issue. One additional thing that you can do if you're a member of Actors Equity Association specifically surrounding scheduling and a way to make it better is to communicate with your business rep what's actually happening in your building. I, before getting more involved with our union and understanding how it works, was under the assumption that business reps knew everything that was happening on every contract, including a show's scheduling, because scheduling is public information on a show's website. Well, it's just not realistic that every business rep knows every schedule of every show as it's happening in real time. It's not realistic. So it's essential that we communicate with our business reps when our schedule is overloaded, when we're doing more than 8 shows a week, because business reps need to know and can log how frequently that is happening. And that data is used in the future to better advocate in support of changing those things. And that's true for anything that we want to change within our contracts or anything that's happening on the job that shouldn't be happening, that we don't feel like supports us or creates safe work environments. You can and should absolutely be communicating all of those things with your business rep. And you can find your business rep by asking the deputy in your building or by going on the equity member portal. You should be able to find out who your business rep is. But if not, you can also call the equity building and ask, hi, I'm working on a show and I don't have the information for my business rep. Can you help connect me to that person? Super easy, super quick, and super essential because business reps log and compile all of the things that members are communicating with them that members want to change or that's happening on the jobs. And all of that data goes towards ways within our union that we can actually push for that change. And I say we as an individual person who's just passionate about the union. I am speaking solely on behalf of myself. When I say we, I'm talking about the collective we as actors and stage managers working on AEA contracts. So communicate with your business rep, please, and thank you. Something else we can do is advocate in support of better care for us, for our voices and bodies and mental well-being. Not only is doing a show physically and vocally demanding, it takes a toll on your actual health and on your mental wellness. It is a lot of energy for no matter what you're experiencing in your life to have to go on stage and to tell a story and to be wholly committed to it. So to set aside whatever you're experiencing, that is mentally very difficult. Imagine having a really bad day, experiencing something terrible, and then having to go on stage and smile as if everything's fine. Or even if you don't perform, having to hold space for someone else in a really gentle and kind way when maybe you've experienced something in your day that makes you extremely frustrated. It's hard. It takes a mental and emotional toll on you. And that's what we do as performers. We put our own mental stuff aside so that we can tell the story for the audience. That is exhausting. And great. And I love it. And it is exhausting. So if we are taken care of better as performers and stage managers, and I believe everyone in our industry could be taken care of better, then we can do our jobs better. And we're going to tell better stories. We're going to put on better shows. We're going to be able to do it at a lower cost to the producers because they're not going to have to pay for extra swings in building or extra costumes when you have to pay someone for a replacement because someone's so injured they can't continue with the show. All of this is going to save producers and general managers money. And it comes at the cost of investing in protecting your performers. But it will save producers and general managers money. I really want to do a quick insert here to say something that is really crucial for me to say. And that's when I talk about shows not having to hire swings, I'm specifically talking about shows not having to hire last minute, day of the show, or really late notice additional swings as a reactionary response because there's not enough coverage in the building while people are out due to injury, due to illness, or due to many of the other things that excessive scheduling creates. So shows absolutely need and should have adequate coverage in terms of swings, standbys, and understudies from the beginning of a show's creation, continuing through the end of that show's run. And a lot of shows don't currently have adequate coverage. And we need to have a larger conversation about what adequate coverage means to us. But in my opinion, a lot of shows don't currently have adequate coverage. So when I'm talking here, I'm talking about it's going to save shows money because you're not going to have to do the reactionary last minute quick hires and emergency costumes because you're having to bring in additional people to cover the people that are not in the show. due to injury and illness, they're going to have those costs be able to be saved because you have enough coverage from the beginning, because shows are investing in support and care for their actors and stage managers. That's essential. It's essential, and it will save shows money. And there's many ways to support and care for your actors and stage managers. And the ways we can be supported, I believe, that I've thought of so far are health and wellness stipends and better PT care. What's a health and wellness stipend? Some companies are doing this already. Some companies are not. But health and wellness stipends are essentially, they're done differently in different buildings. But in some way or another, it's a reimbursement for the costs that you spend on your health and wellness. It's usually done through receipt reimbursement. Different companies offer it covering different things. In my opinion, it should cover all physical, vocal, and mental health of all kinds. I've already spoken to why what we do is so demanding. It's also really unique for each one of us. So every single person on our stage is doing something different from top of show to end of show, even if we're doing the same numbers at certain times. But based on what you're doing, the needs of your job are very unique to you, and they are different than mine. So the way that I need to care for my voice, my body, my mental well-being, also because I'm a different human, is different than everyone else's. Everyone has their own needs, dependent upon their job demands. That is also, I'm putting a little insert here, why I will never advocate or support required group warm-ups. Because there is no way to warm up everyone effectively for their show, for their job's needs, by all doing the same thing. And if I am forced to do a warm-up that does not prepare me for my track, for my show, that is making my job more dangerous and more difficult. So back to health and wellness stipends. So health and wellness stipends reimburse people for the costs that they are putting towards their health and wellness to be able to do their show, to do their job safely and sustainably. Different ones cover different things, but like I said, I think it should cover everything. Right now, we receive a health and wellness stipend at Wicked, which we did not previously receive, which I was a part of pushing and advocating for, which we received, thankfully. And I spend mine on massage therapy, on my personal trainer, on sometimes PT equipment, on sometimes dance classes. You can spend it on voice lessons. You can spend it on acupuncture, on physical therapy, on whatever you might need physically or vocally to do your job. I also believe it should cover mental wellness expenses because, as I've spoken on, what we do is also extremely mentally demanding, and protecting our mental wellness is an essential part of our job. We tell stories about very real and vulnerable emotions. And we, as actors, should have our mental wellness protected by those health and wellness stipends and in other means in our buildings in which it is currently not protected. So that we are able to share those emotions vulnerably and also protect ourselves and our well-being when we are not doing that on stage. I believe that every show would benefit from health and wellness stipends. I believe anyone involved in running the show should receive them. And I believe it would save a show money in the long run. I do believe there could be different varying levels of stipends depending on the physical and vocal and demands of the jobs. They're just different depending on different departments, but I believe there are ways to care for everyone in each building that should be happening that are not currently. I would be more than thrilled to talk to anyone who is currently wanting to navigate having conversations with their company about obtaining a health and wellness stipend. I have put together a proposal for that with a team of coworkers and friends who I'm not going to name because I have not asked their permission, and we achieved it. And we did it in a very intentional manner that I would love to explain and go into detail about. If anyone wants to reach out, I'm more than happy to share that information because, again, we get better together. That's one way I believe we can be taken care of with the difficult demands of our job. Another way is PT care. Physical therapy care in building is a part of protecting the people who do physically demanding work on stage and off to run a show. And I believe everyone should have access to it. There should be enough slots provided so that everyone can get the care they need to run their shows or do their jobs safely. I know this is a complex conversation that also involves communication with the places that offer the PT care that we need. And we need to dive more into detail to have those conversations to guarantee better protection and better care in our buildings. We should also have continuation of care, because I believe proper care means having someone who understands the needs of our show and the needs of our jobs. And if you're working with someone different every single week, there is no way to get an understanding of each other so that we can both communicate and ask for and provide what we need to be able to ensure that I can do my job safely. There's so many conversations that need to happen around PT and better PT care in buildings. And I believe having a well-rounded conversation where we're also involving the PT companies is a part of that. But I just want to speak to advocating for better and more consistent and more offerings of PT care in buildings for people who are doing this work. And finally, we need people who pay for and put on shows and do our contracts to listen. Understanding a situation that you don't physically experience yourself is difficult, but it requires sitting down with, listening to, and really hearing the words of the people who are experiencing it. For example, I am not a stage manager, and recently I became very aware that I don't have a full understanding of the problems that stage managers face. So when I realized that, I made an effort to be in spaces where I am hearing stage managers speak as to their own experiences and their own challenges so that I can better support and hopefully be help in advocating for change for stage managers that they need to be able to do their jobs well and safely. That needs to be the same thing that happens with people who put on shows, who manage show schedules, and understanding the actual needs and experiences of the people who work those schedules and the ways that they are not being supported and the ways that they could be and want to be supported moving forward. Because we have to prioritize humanity and safety over profit. I know that profit is a part of the conversation, which is also why I believe as performers, as stage managers, we can have conversations with and attempt to hear the side of the people who are making these schedules so that we can come to a better solution that everyone is happy with. But what's happening right now is not okay because it is exploiting people's bodies, voices, and mental and physical well-being for profit through scheduling manipulation to make as much money as we can in times when shows are able to do so, such as holiday schedules. So we have to listen. And this is why we have to keep talking about it so that we build community around this so that the sound of our voices speaking about this is so strong so that the people who make the schedules will have to listen. And as always, having conversations with humanity at the center. We have to assume that everyone is doing the best they can to be able to actually listen to each other and to have productive conversations and moving forward. So let's talk about it. Let's support each other. Let's continue to listen to people, how the current scheduling puts so much strain on our bodies and voices and minds and well-being that it's not safe. And let's figure out how we move forward, protecting people better together. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in again to Assembly Guide. Wow. When I started recording this episode, I did not envision it being an hour long, but there's a lot to say. It's a big topic and it really affects people in theatrical industries. I think this is a great one to start conversation around. If you are working in the theater industry, especially working a production contract, or if this resonated with you in general about how tough our schedules are, it would really mean a lot to me if you would share this episode with someone. If you're liking the podcast, if you could give me a like or a follow and a subscribe on whatever podcast listening platform you use, that would be awesome. Leave me a comment. You can follow me at Assembly Guide on Instagram or reach out to me at assemblyguidepodcast@gmail.com. I really want to start having interviews with people soon. So if there's someone you think I should interview or someone you want me to connect with or you want to connect with me, please reach out. I would love to chat and discuss what you feel should change within our industry or what areas you're passionate about pushing for creating change, or maybe you have already in our industry. Reach out to me. Let me know. I would love to discuss. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks again for joining me here at Assembly Guide Podcast. Have a good day. See you next time.